Detective Pikachu was supposed to be the kickoff to a brand new cinematic universe and celebrate Pokemon's return to the big screen in a Wailord-sized way. With fantastic marketing, an engaged and fun cast, plus the most profitable IP in the world to its name, it should have been a surefire hit with a sequel well on its way by now. But instead, the movie kinda just came and went, and the future of live-action Pokemon is up in the air at most. So what happened? Well, with the release of Scarlet and Violet on the horizon, I thought I'd take a look back and see if I can figure out what exactly went wrong with this movie that I really liked and wanted to be a big hit. Hi, I'm Tricky Kappa, your pop culture loving water goblin. Detective Pikachu still feels like a weird fever dream to me. It's hard to think of a movie in recent years that I had such an odd relationship with. When it was first announced the idea of live-action Pokemon, it sounded awful to me. There were decades of movies out there at this point where a real actor goes on a miscellaneous adventure with a talking CG creature. To me, that was proof enough that this would surely be bad, and video game movies up to this point, well, those didn't have a great reputation either. But at the same time, it was being produced by Legendary, and they had helped shepherd in the Monsterverse. I absolutely loved that. But they also produced Warcraft, which, remember what I said about video game movies not being good? At least the orcs looked pretty cool, I thought. However, its director Rob Letterman had helmed 2015's Goosebumps movie, and I'm a huge Goosebumps fan, and I think that movie is such an underrated gem of a film, and in Goosebumps' case and in Pokemon's case, he really respects the source material that he works with. So it was pretty hard to know how to feel about this movie. And then that first trailer dropped, and everything changed. Seeing Pokemon brought to life in such a loving way for the first time was an amazing experience. We've reached a point where the kids that grew up loving Pokemon were now the adults making movies, and they got to do this one, and the love had so clearly translated to the big screen in a fantastic way. The Pokemon were made real, but their designs weren't compromised in the process. They were all animated in such a way that it brought them to life in ways that, quite frankly, the games and anime never could. I remember everyone rallying around this movie in such a huge way. And it was honestly one of the more wholesome times on the internet as of late. And that's saying something for the Pokemon fanbase. Legendary also seemed so bullish on the franchise. They announced a sequel before the first one had even come out, and then a spin-off movie set in the same world, and it kind of sort of sounded like that one might be a more typical Pokemon journey, more like what we see in the games. And when the movie came out, people seemed to really like it. Sure, there were some comments about the simplicity of the plot and some of the acting, but there seemed to be a lot of people ready for more, and then it just never came. I think I've come up with a few reasons why. When Detective Pikachu came out, it was the first theatrically released Pokemon since 2003's Pokemon Heroes, at least outside of Japan. That's over a decade without a Pokemon movie on the big screen. And yeah, Pokemon is indeed the most profitable IP in the world. It's beating out Hello Kitty, Star Wars, hell, even the MCU. A section of the entertainment industry that it's left abandoned for a really long time was theatrically released movies. Once again, at least outside of Japan. Pokemon's first 5 movies all came out in theaters here in the West. But it's important to note that after the first 2, the movies really failed to deliver at the box office, with the lowest being Pokemon Heroes, which apparently only grossed about $746,000. I want to also add, that's a damn shame. Pokemon Forever and Pokemon Heroes are 2 of the best Pokemon movies out there, but I digress. I think this was due to a combination of audiences in the West losing interest in traditionally animated films in favor of 3D animation, as well as Pokemon's initial fan base growing up and sadly losing interest. I think Pokemon didn't gain a new groundswell of fans until around Gen 4, I'd want to say. But what does this all mean for Detective Pikachu? Well, Detective Pikachu came at a time where audiences were, and thanks to The Force Awakens, still continue to be, very caught up in the legacy of the blockbusters that they're watching. And in Pokemon's case, it just didn't have that. A Pokemon movie hadn't come out in over a decade, and the last 3 that did really failed to light up the box office. I think while trailers and marketing for Detective Pikachu were very charming, general audiences weren't sure how to feel about Pokemon Pokemon as a theatrical experience, and instead opted to see the Incredible Hulk-sized second reason that the movie failed to deliver. A lot of big movies came out in 2019. Godzilla King of the Monsters, 1917, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Ugh. Anyway, none of those were bigger than Avengers Endgame. You want to talk about movies that are about legacy? Endgame was the buildup of almost a decade of it. After the gut punch of the Infinity War ending, and this being the end of the Infinity Saga, that for a lot of people they had been watching since they were literal children, it's not a surprise that people rushed out to see it again, and again, and again, and yes, you guessed it, again. Detective Pikachu released just 2 weeks after it. According to Box Office Mojo, Detective Pikachu only really held the #1 spot on the Friday of its release before immediately moving to #2 for the rest of the weekend, being toppled by Endgame. And it continued like that for much of its run. To me, Pokémon Company, WB, and Legendary all massively underestimated not just how excited for Endgame people were, but how often people would go back to see it. I'm a very avid moviegoer, so I went to go see both of these. I think the powers that be vastly underestimated the amount of crossover with these audiences. Most people aren't going to see movies every week the way someone like myself and others do. A lot of people only go to see a couple movies a year, if that. And while Detective Pikachu was trying to jumpstart Pokemon's journey into the realm of the cinematic, Endgame was celebrating and ending an era that took a decade to build up to, and people chose the latter. I think the final feather in this far-fetched shaped cap that led to Detective Pikachu's downfall is the source material. Detective Pikachu the video game was a 3DS Pokemon spin-off in the vein of a point-and-click adventure. Think something like Monkey Island. Not what many people's first experiences with Pokemon were, if we're being honest. Throughout Detective Pikachu the movie, the characters talk about trainers and going on a journey, and hell, our main character Tim's whole thing is that at some point he did want to be a Pokemon trainer before deciding to live a normal life, but we never really get to see much of that side of things. The one classic style Pokemon battle that we do get is over very quickly, and in Rhyme City where the movie takes place, Pokemon battles are even illegal. I get why Detective Pikachu seemed like an enticing prospect for adaptation though. For one thing, a movie centered in a few locations, much of it being a city, is probably a lot cheaper than a globe-spanning adventure with a lot of different locales. Pokemon games can span everything from cities, caves, vast oceans, hell, even space. And that could very quickly become a very expensive movie to make. And because canonically no one in Rhyme City uses Pokeballs, it allowed them to come up with a lot of fun ways to showcase the Pokemon doing everyday things that we don't usually get to see them doing. And I do want to give the movie credit for that. Half of the fun of this movie is looking in the background to see what awesome stuff you can spot. But I think when people picture their time with Pokemon in their head, they think about the thrill of catching their first Pokemon, hunting for a Dragonair in the Safari Zone, or landing that final blow on Blue and becoming the Elite Four champion. Instead, Pokemon made its cinematic debut with an adaptation of a spin-off game that I don't think much of the general public played, to be quite frank. I think if people had seen a more classic, we're going on an adventure style movie, it would have stood a much better chance. Not only is this more in line with the games, but it's also more in line with the anime, which has been going for decades now and still has a very active fan base. A noir style detective film set in the Pokemon universe maybe should have been the second or third movie where you've gained an audience's trust for something a little more out there. Detective Pikachu was a very fun experiment. I know the movie has its flaws, but I will always appreciate the love and care that went into making it. And who knows, maybe someday we will get to see more from this side of Pokemon. Netflix reported a while back that they were in early production of a live-action Pokemon series, so maybe that can carry the torch. Who knows though, their history of live-action adaptations is, we'll say spotty at best. I'd love to hear what you all want out of live-action Pokemon though, and what reasons you think Detective Pikachu didn't make the waves it should have. So let me know in the comments below, make sure to subscribe, and hit that bell icon.